Gotcha. All right. So, can you introduce yourself?
First name is Undibisi. Middle name Emmanuel. Last name Okoro. From Nigeria originally. Resettled here in the U.S. Age of right before I turned 18. Yeah. Grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and born and raised in Nigeria before moving over here to go to college, and life continued from there. So it's been an interesting journey so far. So things I like to do, things about me, I like working out, like meeting new people, and I like being by the ocean a lot. And so every chance I get, I go to the beach and just sit on the beach and stare at the water. Something about the nature of water, so vast and so awe-inspiring, that it calms you down and allows you to refocus. And so being by the ocean is a very, very key aspect of who I am. I always like to meditate or just sit and relax and think. And so that's a long and short story of who I am.
So tell me about Nigeria.
Nigeria is very diverse. Starting out before we got our independence in 1960, well, I'm a U.S. citizen now, but I still say our independence because my roots are Nigeria, right? But when Nigeria got the independence in 1960, we were under British colony. And at the time, we were set up by a group of people that are pretty much just friends. And they have literally ruled Nigeria since then. And it's just been a change of hands from one of them to the other, one of them to the other, one of them to the other. And Nigeria is, I haven't verified this fact, but I was told this a while ago, Nigeria is the only country in the world that produces sulfur-free oil. Something about that location to the equator that allows the oil to be sulfur-free. I don't know what it is or what the science behind it is, but oil with sulfur in it requires additional processing, but Nigeria doesn't have it. So initially, in 1960, Nigeria's currency was 1 naira to $1 back then. And the leaders squandered everything. And so Nigeria went from being a flourishing nation to now just, ridden with poverty everywhere. You've got the upper class and the lower class. There's no middle class. You might find yourself slightly above the lower class, but really you're lower class. Because all those that upper class, they don't even associate with normal people. I mean, it's a weird scenario. Nigeria just, but it's full of culture and life, and everybody's so optimistic about the future. That you wonder how would anything ever change. Because it's a Christian, Muslim, and I guess, what you would call other traditions, um, different types of religion, but Christianity is dominant in certain parts of Nigeria, and so people, for some reason, have been led to think that they don't need to do anything for themselves. All they have to do is just pray. So I don't know. I'm hoping that something strikes a balance soon, or when chaos reaches a point of not being able to sustain chaos, order comes out of it. So we'll see how things turn around for Nigeria. And so many poor people in Nigeria.
When were you born in Nigeria?
August 1781. And that time, see, it was, I believe it had just transitioned to military control at the time. Yeah, because Nigeria rotates between civilian leadership to military leadership for some reason. Because every once in a while there'll be a coup. There's only been one war, civil war in Nigeria, and that was when the Igbo tribe tried to break away from Nigeria, because somehow, this is just how it's set up. Igbos are in the eastern part of Nigeria, Yorubas are in the western part of Nigeria, and Hausas are in the northern part of Nigeria. Then you got other cultures, Calabar, Edo people, Wari people. But Igbos are inventors. They are marketers, they're business people, they're really the economy of Nigeria, right? And they're also the one culture in Nigeria that strives for the highest educational level you can get. And so I think because of that, they felt they were the economic engine, so they could sustain themselves, and they didn't need the rest of Nigeria, so they tried to break away. But I think at the time they were trying to break away with Yoruba people, but the Yoruba people decided to side with Hausa people, and ended up conquering the leaders at the time that were running that civil war. So, after the war, everything went back to people just not wanting to be in leadership, and just letting the same group of people that started out and when Nigeria got an independence, it's still ruling till today. It's still the same people. So that's been interesting. It's if you talk to Nigerians about the state of affairs in the country, the first thing you hear is they're very disappointed. They wish things could be different. Wish Nigeria could be much better. But it's just the state of affairs, and really the only way any change is going to happen is if chaos reaches a point it can't sustain itself anymore, and order comes out of it. So yeah, order often comes out of chaos.
So how was it like growing up in kind of a chaotic political climate and environment?
You are surrounded by hustlers growing up. Everywhere you turn is you see people hustling. You see people hawking food on the side of the road. People, selling you an item, or everybody is doing everything they could to survive, because there were no basic amenities. No electricity, or if there's electricity, it only shows up from time to time. No running water. Everyone has to have their own wells. And there weren't any good roads. You know, the only decent roads were main highways. All the side roads were crap. And so, you know, you get the sense that growing up in Nigeria, you get that you don't really have to be told that it's your responsibility to make sure you survive, because you see it all around you. You know, you see everybody doing everything they can to get by. And so, coming out of that environment, you're kind of stuck in that mode of constantly, you know, striving for something next, something new, striving for something more, striving for something better. And I don't think I've ever met a Nigerian that's risk averse, you know, because, you know, that's how we grow up. Is we grow up if you grew up in Nigeria, you grew up surrounded by people that constantly are struggling. And so that struggle sets your tone for pretty much being an overachiever for the rest of your life. So, yeah, Nigeria is interesting. Oh, and another interesting thing about Nigeria growing up was I found it amazing that there were lines on the road, right? You got your 4-lane highway, 5-lane highway, 3-lane highway. The natural conditions all around you. You've got dry season, wet season. You've got really high temperatures. During wet season, you got monsoon type of rains. I mean, you know, so it gets so hot in Nigeria that you can it's like Arizona type desert temperatures. On top of that, it's extremely high humidity, almost 100% most times in the wet season. So you get all these conditions, and yet you have people that are out day in, day out, day and night, hustling, trying to survive. That's life in Nigeria, you know. One interesting thing to note is, you know, you may ask for something from your parents, but they'll never turn you down, right? They'll tell you get it tomorrow. You figure out eventually yourself that tomorrow never comes. But the fact that, you know, on top of, you know, you've got all this chaos going on, everybody's striving to survive, Nigerians are still very positive. That's the strangest combination, you know, that you have.
We left off talking about basically, you know, how it is to live in Nigeria. You feel like it's constant and daily struggle to survive, but yet the people's attitude about it is very positive. So it's just a way of life, basically. Can you talk a little bit about your parents, and could you go back to maybe the furthest relative, the oldest relative you know, or the furthest relative down the family tree that you can name?
Well, my family is very close, and you know, cousins, uncles, aunts, my grandma when she was alive kept everyone together, right? She will make sure that everyone came to the village for Christmas. And so because of that, we always saw each other, and even if you didn't live in the same city, you'd at least see each other once a year at Christmas for at least a week or two. And so now going back, oldest relative that I can remember is my grandma, right? I didn't well, I was really young when my grandfather passed, but on both sides, my dad and my mom's side, my grandfather's died early, and then my grandma's lived longer. So I remember my grandma on my dad's side the most because that's where we spent most of the time. Even though we did visit my grandma and spend some time over there from time to time on my mom's side. But as far as my parents go, you know, they were, you know, I mean, it made us who we are today. They were very education driven, and they always, you know, instilled on us the importance of excelling. And you know, my dad would always say that he was the top of his class, no matter what subject it was. He went to college on a full scholarship, went to grad school on a full scholarship, did his PhD on a full scholarship, all through it, full scholarship. You know, so because of that, he had extremely high standards when it came to learning, and we both my parents did their advanced degrees, their graduate degrees in England, and I guess when they came, they moved back to Nigeria because my dad had a passion in education, and he wanted to bring up young Nigerians to be really good educators too. So he had his PhD in electrical engineering, and my mom was a nurse, and she was the matron of the hospital she was at, and that's the chief nurse essentially. And so, you know, with them, the standards were high, education-wise, and it took a while to get to that point of understanding, you know, that it's your responsibility to make sure you're understanding what you're doing in class. But the one thing they did for us, which was very good, was we got tutors. You know, I don't know how they did it. Even with all this scraping by, they still made education a priority.
That's a question. How being that your dad is a PhD in electrical engineering and you said your mom was the chief nurse of the hospital, wouldn't that put you and your family at a higher socio-economic class?
No. It's a hospital, but it doesn't mean that they're getting paid what they're worth. Now, they went to England on scholarships, right? Got their degrees and they moved back to Nigeria. And you would think that they will be in a high socioeconomic status. They could if they wanted to. My dad decided to go work in a local university, earning the same salary as a professor as every other professors in Nigeria. And if you know anything about educators here, teachers get paid crap. Over there is even worse. Teachers get paid even worse crap, you know. And so, I guess for them it was a real balancing act. Interesting thing was that they could have gone back to England at any point in time if they wanted, because they got their degrees from England, right, and worked in England. But they chose to stay in Nigeria, live under those living conditions, and teach younger people, you know. So it wasn't until I was the first to leave the house and leave the country. So it wasn't until I left the country that my mom now went back to England to work so she could support me, so my parents could support me and pay for my education here. And so, you know, that always struck me. Like, you were the top of your class. You could go back to England, right? Change everything for your whole family if you wanted to. But no, we weren't middle class at all. Like, we lived And we lived in an apartment, yeah. You know, we were okay when it came to housing and all that. But as far as anything else, you know, you'd have clothes, but you wouldn't have more than 2 pair of shoes or 3 pair of shoes, right? Um, you'd get new clothes only at Christmas. You'd pretty much get hand-me-downs for the rest of the year, you know. My oldest brother got to pick whatever he wanted, and then I got whatever he wanted, you know. And then my younger brother got whatever I couldn't wear anymore. So that was life, you know. And so, yeah, so the socioeconomic status, you know, in Nigeria, like I was saying earlier, there's the upper class and there's lower class. There's no middle class.
So what's the difference in as far as the lower class and the upper class then, if it's not education?
The upper class are people in political positions that gut the country of all its finances. So they have finances stacked up. It's in some cases so ridiculous that you'd have a guy that has rooms in his house only filled with cash because he stole all that money from the government. Those are the upper class, the people that steal the money and keep it for themselves. That's the upper class. I don't think I've heard of anyone in any high position in Nigeria that didn't steal money, right? Now, at some point in my dad's career, he had a friend that became a governor of one of the states in Nigeria, and he asked my dad to be the Minister of Education for his department. And my dad, you know, while he was in that position, had so many people come to him with bags and bags of money to do stuff, and he turned it all down because his priority was education. And he did so much in that state. It's till today, his name is on the wall.
So your dad was Minister of Education for a state?
For a state.
What state
for
was
a very
that?
short, Imo State, my home state. For a very short period of time. I think it was like 2 years. And you'd think that would have changed the socioeconomic status. It didn't, because my parents weren't. They were very humble, reserved, if you will, people, and their primary focus was helping other people. Like every week, every weekend, every chance that they got, they would, there'll be people in the house. They'll be helping solve problems that other people have. If there were family issues, my dad was the central. He's the oldest in the family, so he pretty much resolved issues between my uncles and aunts. And he kept the family together. And before he passed, he wanted to do a large family reunion and bring everybody together, all the nephews and nieces, cousins, uncles, aunts, everybody together in one place. And that didn't happen before he passed. But he kept everybody together. He was at his funeral. I mean, it was impressive. His reach was, I saw his reach at his funeral. I had no idea. There was, I want to say, over 1,000 people at his funeral. I mean, it was a lot of people. I mean, people that went through him in college, people that he helped when he was a minister, people that he helped find jobs, people that he helped, them figure out their paths in life, people that, I mean, it was so many people that he helped. It was crazy. And that's the one thing, about my parents is that it wasn't about the money for them. It was about helping people,
Hmm.
and so that was really good.
So your dad's played a very vital role in your life.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Do you remember any specific traditions that might have to do with, your religion or your Igbo tradition that you remember doing when you were younger?
Well, when my parents were Christians, my mom is still alive. She's a Christian. My dad was a Christian, and my grandparents were Christians. My grandfather was I think, either some type of minister at the local church in the village, and so. A lot of the traditions we have back home are usually filled with some type of ritual, and we didn't participate in local traditions because of that. So there's a coming of age tradition. It's called Iwakwa. It's something that every man is supposed to do when he turns 21 or later on in life when he has enough funding to fund the celebration. I haven't actually participated in one, never done it, but from what I know about it, what I heard about it, you'd have to climb either a coconut tree or a palm kernel tree, harvest a tree, bring it back down. That's a lot, and we're talking with bare feet and just fronds woven around, wrapping around the tree. You're proving your manhood essentially. That's one of the tasks. And I think you have to haul a whole bunch of things back and forth a certain distance, and then you dance through the square, and you do it with a group of other men, so it's a competition of sorts, and so that's one tradition. And so there's so many other traditions, especially when it comes to burial. And there's witchcraft is still prevalent in the village, and so there's a witch doctor, there's the practitioners, and there's those people that believe they can fly. So yeah, and the Igbo tradition is a very vast and rich tradition. We just didn't participate in a lot of it because we're Christians, so we didn't really get to see, the masquerades dancing in the square or joining the music celebrations and all that stuff. We didn't get to do, any of the major festivals.
So you would say that, well, would you say that you've had more in common with African American Christianity and celebration and tradition than you would with Igbo tradition?
Yeah, I'd say, we'd celebrate Christmas, celebrate Easter, so I have more in common with that side of the spectrum than with, my culture,
So on Christmas, did you celebrate Thanksgiving? I guess Thanksgiving is not.
No, Thanksgiving is a U.S. thing.
Okay, so Christmas and Easter, did you guys have your own take on the food that was cooked, or did you guys cook, or how was that how was that celebrated?
It's a feast, so the local meals, staples are rice, pounded yam soup, you know, you'd have either cow, goat meat, or chicken or turkey, you know, or you have everything if you wanted to. It depends on if different families are coming together, different people are cooking. And so, yeah, same thing, exact same thing at Easter. It's just it's a feast. We don't do the sharing of gifts. We don't do all that stuff. It's really just about spending time together, you know. And
You would say it's not as commercialized as Christmas is here.
no, it's not at all. No. Yeah, it's a whole different weird ballgame here. I for years I found it difficult to celebrate Christmas here because it is really strange that you have to buy someone a gift when Christ died. We're giving someone else a gift because, like, why? You know, so giving someone a gift because someone died. I mean, what? That doesn't make any sense. You know, so.
Pause for a second. Nah, I mean you're 100% right, and it doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? But you know, there's a lot of stuff in this damn country doesn't make any sense. So
I mean, you know, but people can't see that.
But you know what, you just brought up something that I would have never even thought about. The fact that we all celebrate Christmas, but we all celebrate it differently. You would think that it was the same across the board. Even in your own country, you're celebrating Christmas on the same day that we celebrate it, except that you having a complete different version of it. It's almost like you live in a completely different reality than we do. We're here giving each other gifts, and you guys are actually sharing moments with family.
What the heck is the tree for?
I don't even know.
What's the star on the tree? What is that? It's
I don't know. You guys don't hang a tree up for Christmas?
Well, you might you might get like a little tree thing, you know, just because.
Yeah.
Because American culture is creeping into.
Do you feel like it's getting more commercial?
It is. But that whole gift giving thing has not reached Nigeria yet. No, I mean, as far as things, the culture being transferred across in Nigeria, you know, clothing wise, I know Nigerians, we like to look good, so clothing wise, you know, the style here, street culture here is pretty much the same in Nigeria. Street clothing is the same, and so yeah, and you can definitely match the entertainment industry here with the entertainment industry in Nigeria. Pretty much the same, and there's a lot of collaboration going on right now too. So, but you know, those other things in celebrations, Christmas, Easter is just like, what the heck is the egg for, or the bunny rabbit, or I mean, why do you have to hide eggs, Easter eggs, out in the like? And some of them are hard-boiled, some of them are filled with candy. What's the candy? What is, like... Yeah. That's some real stupid shit. Excuse my French. That is stupid.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So, let's pause it here.
Jews are actually black people, and that the true location of where Jews are, it's all on YouTube. Actually, if you look it up, people have done documentaries of how things from the Bible were actually taken directly from Igbo history, Igbo literature. Specific places in Igbo land are literally translated from Igbo language. So, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things in this world that you just wonder, okay, what is real and what is not, right? this is this conversations we've had in the past. History is not really history if you weren't there. It's just what someone else tells you. What they want you to think is what happened.
Right.
Right? And so that's one thing I never got to really dig into was that my dad said Igbos are Hebrews. And then the meaning of my last name is traveler. So that blew my mind, that we as a group, as a culture, came from somewhere. And the funny thing about the Igbo land or Igbo culture is in all of Nigeria, for some reason, every Igbo person is called Okoro. I don't know why. My last name, other cultures refer to all Igbo people with my last name. I don't know why. It's called Okoro. Sometimes it's done in jest or in a joking way that he's an Okoro or he's an Okoro man, right? And it's like, so I just wonder, these are things that you never have answers to. I mean, but even if you had an answer, even if you could get, where would you go for an answer is a question, right? Amen. You have to be, I don't know, the local kings, they speak the language on a whole different level, so you can't even go ask them questions and whatnot. You can't really dig deep. I'd love to be able to go back home and just sit with the local chiefs and local rulers and just find out more,
So, you talked about coming to the States for your education and your mom having to work in London. How was that experience? I mean, talk a little bit about the struggle of getting over here. I mean, it seems like it wasn't the easiest thing to do, obviously, since you guys had to leave Africa and then your mom had to go to London, so I'm assuming it was a process.
Yeah, I mean, my first year and a half in college, my mom was still in Nigeria. I think it was the last 2 years that she went to England. But me coming here, I picked aerospace. Well, I had two options. My mom thought I was going to be a surgeon. I was either going to pick the medical field or engineering. But I was fascinated by airplanes. But I was also fascinated by biology. Because I used to, as a kid, catch bugs and dissect them, right, and study them. I never got to the level of frogs, but I will always catch bugs and dissect them. So, at the age of 13, I picked aerospace. I knew I wanted to do aerospace, so I somehow became very adamant about it, and my dad was pretty much saying, "How are you gonna do it? There's no aerospace in the country. Where are you gonna go?" And I was like, he was like, what's gonna happen? I said, well, then my answer was, well, I don't know, but God will make a way. And then he said, well, if you become an aerospace engineer, I guess the sky's the limit. I said, no, the sky's not the limit. Those are two things I remember when having that conversation with my dad, and then he was like, then I was like, well, that, did you forget that when you went to school in England, you didn't know how you were going to pay for it? And I was like, I pretty much shut him up. And he was like, well, I guess you really want to go. So my mom took it upon herself to help me figure out how to even make that transition. You're a kid in Lagos, never been to an embassy before, don't even know what the word embassy is. All you know is you want to study, figure out how aircrafts work, right? And I was very good at math. I was doing advanced college level math in high school. I was in the math team, doing math competitions in high school, and so and I was very good at physics at the time, and chemistry and biology. And sciences was my thing, and then technical drawing, 3D visualization was my thing. And so that process, was quite a long process, because I started it right before I graduated high school. I graduated high school at the age of 16, and I stayed at home a year before I went to college. But during that time, I was taking all the, just like here you have your SAT and your ACTs. Over there you have different college level exams to take to get in different colleges. So I was taking those exams and also taking the SAT and ACT. I went to Ghana by myself at the age of 16 without my parents to go take one of the English exams to even be able to apply to come to college here, because you got your science and math exams, and then you've got the English exams. And I got those exams. I passed them, to a reasonable level, and applied to different schools. And the first school to respond was Mississippi State University. And so, but other schools responded, but I became fixated on Mississippi State University because they were the first to respond. And all through life, I've always liked quick responses. If I get a quick response from someone, I will weigh them higher than someone that responds to me 3-4 hours later, right? And so I got a response from Mississippi State. Didn't have any money, didn't know what. Well, I kept, before I took the exams, I kept visiting the U.S. consulate, go through the library there. My mom got me access to that place, I don't know how. I would visit the library there, I'd look at schools, look at different professions. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what it was called at the time. So I kept looking at different fields and whatnot. So I look at aerospace, aeronautical, but then I remember seeing a book in the library that had the salaries of the different fields. I looked up aerospace, and I saw the salary of aerospace, and I was like, bam, that's it. So I don't know how, but I did. And I did the same thing when I came here. I researched it again when I came here, what the salaries were, future salaries were. I've always been a forward-thinking person too, so I don't plan for now, I plan for 5 years down the road. And so when I got accepted to college, I didn't have a dime. And my favorite auntie in the world, Auntie Rose, she allowed my dream to come true. She gave me $13,000 cash, and that's what paved the way for me coming here. So this is I would have been sitting here, one, if it wasn't because my mom helped me, and two, because my aunt further helped make that happen. But, you know, my dad paid back my aunt, but still, you know, if it wasn't for my aunt, like sitting my dad down and saying, he is going, you know, because my aunt traveled a lot, so she knew the importance of, you know, allowing a kid to dream and dream big. And so she made it happen. She made it happen. And you know, from there I came over here, and I remember my visa interview at the U.S. consulate. You know,
Oh, okay, good. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. As you can see, doing all this as one person is very...
Alright, so I remember my visa interview at the U.S. consulate at the time was walked in, there was like 5 people in front of me. Denied. They weren't given, that lady was not given visas that day. So I was shitting my pants walking up to the lady. I was so nervous walking to the lady. I don't know why, but she was in the mood. She just wasn't giving visas to people that day. And I walked up and introduced myself. And the first thing she said was, "Wow, you speak good English." And I was like, yeah. And what do you want to study? Aerospace engineering? Oh. Bam. Granted. That was it. That was it. That lady gave me my life, man. That lady, the U.S. consulate has so much power. The people that give educational visas have so much power over a person's life. Yeah, it's interesting.
That is really interesting. I never even knew that.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So they must just have a freaking... they must have an open window where a person just pushes a button to get their visa in India and China, because apparently...
Yeah, they're flooding over here from those countries. You know? Yeah. And, yeah, Nigerians are smart people, man. Very smart. I have yet to meet a dumb Nigerian.
So... you overcame the trial based on what things, you know, and I'm making the assumption that it was a combination of the conditions, and it really was a combination of your family, and the support that they gave you, and so what would you say, you know, it was that helped you overcome that trial in your life?
I mean, I do have a strong belief in God, and 100% believe in God, and you know, I had to laser focus somehow on what I wanted to do, but I had 100% belief that it was going to happen, and believed that God would make a way. Now, as I've gotten older, looking back, I see how people have taken the story of God and turned it into whatever they want to turn it into. You know, teaching all kinds of different crazy things, right? But you know, I attribute my life at the time being able to get through that and not be a kid that was out partying at the time and not focused on school and all that, to both my parents and my personal belief in God. And you know, so really I had no say, no control of any of the situations, but it happened one after the other, just doors opening, and there was no way I could know what was going to happen next, you know. And so, you know, how does a kid 16 years old go from Nigeria through 4 countries by road to Ghana to take an exam and come back safely? Same route, by road, by himself, with no cell phone. There were no cell phones in Nigeria at the time. Without your parents freaking out. How that happened, I don't know. Like, I got on the road on the way to the border in Nigeria. You know, I was riding public transportation. All I remember was, like, I'll get to one border. First of all, getting the passport in Nigeria is crazy. When you finally get the passport, you know, now you have a green booklet that everybody in the world dislikes for some reason. Like, having a Nigerian passport is almost like a curse in certain countries. So going through the border, you know, at that time, that on its own was an experience. I mean, things just kept happening one after the other. I don't even know, I don't remember, I think my mom had a friend in Ghana or something. Because I had a place to stay when I got there, but I don't remember how I got the place to stay. So I think my mom had a friend in Ghana. Most of it is a blur to me, because it was just so unbelievable that this stuff is happening. You know, without anyone being around me, I got paired up with someone that was going in the same direction, going to Ghana. And so, a very nice gentleman, I mean, and he took it up on himself to kind of help me through the border, you know? And he helped me understand that I have to pay my way through. And so I paid my way through and made it through all the borders. I think it was Togo, Benin. I don't remember if there was another country. It might have been just 3, getting through 3 different borders. And so that, man.
Could you tell me a little bit about your parents' upbringing?
My grandparents, my grandfather was also the local village principal. So during the era of a whole bunch of tradition and traditional beliefs and twin killings and all that stuff, my dad was a twin. My dad and my aunt were almost killed. And my grandfather, I think he was like 6'7" or something like that, huge man. He protected them, and his priority was also at the time, no one in the village believed in educating girls. But my grandfather instilled on every one of his kids, you have to get a degree. I don't really know what my grandfather's educational background was, but all my aunts have PhDs. All my uncles have PhDs. My dad had a PhD too. My grandfather instilled in the family that education is priority. And it's true. Education opens doors, gives you new understandings, but not only that, it allows you to progress, to get into something you potentially could like. Without education, you can't be anyone. You will just be an illiterate individual for the rest of your life. And one of his, if I remember this correctly, one of his sayings was, "No knowledge is wasted." Always learn something new. You know, and so, yeah. Well, maybe I'm just interpreting it that way, but he said it on the lines of that. No knowledge is wasted. Always learn something new.
Do you think it's a cultural thing for Nigerians and Africans in general to put high standards and regard on education?
It is, yes. And if you think about it, it's because they have nothing else to focus on, right?
What do you mean by that?
Is to focus on to come out of poverty, right? There's a saying that says if a man reaches the bottom, you know, I guess it's just an idiom in my language. If you reach the bottom, the only way out is up, right? You're gonna find how to get out of your situation, and people in Africa are in such abject poverty that the only real practical way they've come to understand there's a way out of poverty is education. It's not necessarily business. Before you can do business, you have to be educated in what you want to sell. It's education. Education is the foundation. If you have society where the masses are poorly educated, they're going to be extremely poor. If they're highly educated, they're going to become surgeons, brain surgeons. That's the difference. Education is the foundation of change. The way you can really change situations or drive movements is by educating people. Education is priority. And that's really the only way people, the only thing people have access to there to even change their lives is to focus on. And then there's another thing that Africans believe in. They believe that the only way out of poverty is you either become a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. That's standard. There's no such thing as art or music in Nigeria, because that's what they believe will get you out of poverty. Because art doesn't thrive in Africa.
That's really interesting, because now that gets me into my next line of questions. How do Africans then capture their own culture if art doesn't thrive there?
So what's happening now is a return to art, right? Back then, it was an era of good, from 1960, good economic development, then the war, then abject poverty ever since, right? So people were just focused on getting out of poverty. So now that you have adults in their 40s that had artistic natures back then, but because their parents stumped it out of them and made them focus on becoming doctors and lawyers and engineers, because that's what they understood would get them out of poverty. People are now returning to their true passions, which is art, right? So there's a lot of sculptures coming back up, a lot of things, being placed in so many areas in Nigeria that's all about art. Nigeria doesn't have very good museums because, you see it in movies, you see a lot of Nigerian history in England or in US. The actual artifacts were taken from us, and so, there's a lot of truths in movies, like Black Panther, you see how, what's his name, I was talking about the vibranium that was stolen from the Edo people of Benin in Nigeria. And if you paid attention to the rest of the artifacts in that museum where he took the vibranium, all that stuff in those cabinets were from Nigeria. If you go back and watch it again, every last one of them were Nigerian artifacts. So, the authentic artifacts were taken from us.
So, how has that shaped your relationship with art?
Well, so initially I was artistic, but it went from being artistic to being technical. And so I went from freehand sketching to just straight 3D technical drawing, right? Freehand sketching is your creative side, when you can actually replicate facial features and whatnot. I had a great interest in that, but I didn't have a way to actually learn how to get better in it because that was just not being taught. So a lot of people end up losing their artistic side. They can remain creative, they just can't draw or sketch for anything. They might be able to visualize in 3D, but they can't sketch. Sketching is not being taught. It's like singing. You can have the base, foundation for hearing the different notes, right? You can hear the notes, but then you can sing certain notes and keys, but if you don't get proper training, you won't be able to hold the notes and keys, right? You keep on switching between tenor and bass and alto, tenor, bass, alto. As a guy, if you understand music, you keep switching. You won't be able to hold it without proper training. So that's the thing about art, is if you don't have the natural born talent, you can actually train to develop the talent. Perfect example of that is my brother. He trained in music. My older brother, he's a pianist, and now he has a music company. But he's an electrical engineer, but he kept his artistic side by staying involved in the sound, the sound ministry in churches. And he had the musical, we all had the musical ears because my mom was a singer, she was a soprano. But because art is not being taught in Nigeria, a lot of people lose their artistic side. And so
I want to do two things. First, I want to play a word game with you. In this word game, I'm gonna say some words, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Cool?
Cool.
All right. First word is family. First thing that comes to your mind, quick.
Lots of family.
Grandma.
Favorite.
Nigeria.
Interesting.
Logos.
Lagos.
Legos.
Home.
Attitude.
Pizzazz.
Christmas.
Weird.
Education.
Important.
Finance.
Important.
Father.
Foundation.
USA.
Interesting.
Mom.
Foundation.
Aunt.
Love.
Humble.
Humanity.
Ritual.
I'm not sure.
Academics.
Important.
Money.
Opportunity.
Afrobeat.
Relaxation.
Okay. If you could be portrayed, I'm sorry. The next question is, this interview produces a portrait of you. There are things in this interview that I want to take and put in the portrait, things that represent you. These are artifacts. But in the portraits, I want to represent you in a very, very positive light. So the question is, how would you like to be portrayed in this portrait?
That's an academia. I firmly believe that is important to not only learn what you're in, but be the best at what you're in. But in order to be the best at what you're in, you have to be willing to read the textbooks of the subject you're in. But not only that, be able to teach others what you're in. You don't really know if you understand something until you can teach it to someone else. When I say teach, I mean not only explain it, but have them walk away with knowing how to do what you're trying to show them. You can't just, teaching is not giving an example. Teaching is imprinting that example on the person you're teaching or you're explaining to, that they now understand. For example, PADMAS is taught with an acronym. You imprint that acronym on an individual for the rest of his life. Now he remembers PADMAS for the rest of his life. SOHCAHTOA, sine, cosine, tangent. That's another phrase, but it's imprinted in an individual for the rest of their life. So, I'd like, if my portrait were to be hung on a wall somewhere, I'd like a kid to be able to see it and say to himself, I can be the best at what I do. And I can actually excel at what I do.